Welcome to Let's Chat with Julie Lewin in the Trauma Talk series, where together we'll navigate the depths of the impact trauma has on our lives and collective well-being, shining a light on resilience, healing, and the transformative power of doing the inner work. I'm your host, Julie Lewin. Thank you for joining us. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Let's Chat with Julie Lewin. And my special guest today is Monica Parikh, and I'm so excited to have Monica on our podcast. I met Monica earlier in the year, and we knew straight away that we were going to be friends. So welcome, Monica, and I'm going to introduce you properly, and then we'll start chatting. So let's have a look. Monica just lights my soul up with what she's doing in the world. She works with ultra successful people who you would assume don't need a coach, and they're the ones who call Monica. Her clients have included Harvard-educated psychiatrists, Ivy League professors, successful CEOs, Hollywood actors, serial entrepreneurs, and self-made billionaires. And Monica's practice combines law, psychology, quantum physics, and spirituality, right up my alley. And what Monica didn't know is that I worked in law for 20 years as a paralegal. So we have a lot that we're going to talk about.
I didn't know that, Julie. I was a lawyer for 20 years.
I know. And anyway, your particular interest is in healing childhood trauma, and I think that's just fantastic because that's where a lot of the, what will I call it, the challenges we face as adults come from those imprints as children. And so Monica creates relationships on a higher 5D plane between whole purpose-aligned people, and her private clients fund her not-for-profit, building mental health programs for children globally. I just love all of that, Monica. So why don't we dive in, have a nice juicy chat about what drives us from a spiritual perspective. So if you want to share a little bit more about your journey and what got you to be in my world.
Gosh, well, you and I definitely were divinely appointed to meet. I feel that so strongly. And of course, all the people that I've had as clients and people I've known in my life, I definitely think have been on divine appointment. I guess my journey has been, for me, an interesting one. It started, to be honest with you, it started at birth, but when it really kicked off was when I had a traumatic divorce in 2008.
Yeah.
And at that time, I started to undergo psychoanalysis. I just was very devastated and I was grieving and I wanted to figure out how I could bring myself back to happiness again.
Mm-hmm.
And what ended up happening for me is I had a very, very, very gifted psychologist. My psychologist was training all the psychologists at a major hospital in New York City. And I didn't realize it at the time, but he was training me as well. I didn't realize that wasn't the intention that I had gone to see him with. And what ended up happening was we developed a very, very close and trusting relationship that spanned many years. And at the end of my psychotherapeutic journey, he told me he had never gotten any of his psychologists to the level he had gotten me at.
Wow.
And when he told me that, I didn't know what he was talking about, to be honest with you. And I didn't have that much of a sense of self at that point.
Yeah.
So and at the end of my journey, I was very raw. I I was putting a lot of puzzle pieces together on a quantum level of what childhood trauma attracts to oneself, and
Yeah.
what it also, the, for lack of a better word, the reality you live in from
Mm.
that traumatized place.
Yeah.
So I didn't really believe him. And I went to see someone else because I wanted to keep learning and I wanted to keep growing. And I really, really, really just had an innate love of psychology. At the
Yeah.
time, I had practiced law for 20 years. And so when I got to a certain level, I felt, well, I really should teach. Let me build a business and let me teach.
Mm-hmm.
And let me also keep studying. So I went to a different coach who was in her 70s. And
Yeah.
she was teaching me so much more. I kept growing and I kept learning and I kept growing. And she basically then said to me, I've never gotten anyone to your level. And again, I didn't understand that because it wasn't my intention to be a healer. That wasn't my intention. My intention was to be a good person, to stop a lot of bad things from happening to me, and to be a
Yeah.
happy, integrated, whole person. So
Yeah.
that's like a very truncated, the learning has really not stopped. The learning keeps
No.
going. And I'm right now at a place, where I took a sabbatical for a year and a half from work, and I've been traveling the whole world because I felt like my mind couldn't keep up with the level of learning and growth that I was experiencing
Ah,
exponentially. And I needed some time to myself to integrate everything within my body system. So that's
yes.
that's a long explanation of sort of where I am, who I am and where I am on this journey.
Yeah. Wow. And then you found me, I don't know, a couple of months ago. And I just knew from the way that you wrote to me that I was going to really like you. And then when we chatted for like 2 hours, where normally I chat for 15 minutes with someone. So that kind of says how much we connected. And I think that um, the whole concept of this podcast is stuff happens out in the world, but it's our inner world, it's the inner work that we do that informs our outer world. And so as you were going through your therapy with the first person and then the second person, I imagine that your outer world was changing as your inner world was changing. Would that be a fair assessment?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was a
Mm.
process for me, and I don't know if other people feel this way. There was no quick shift. There was
No.
no like magic button that I pressed and then the outer world completely shifted. It was a very slow, gradual shifting process. So, one of the things I remember from being a little child was in my mind, I always used to say, I want to be free. I want to be free. I
Mm.
want to be free. I want to be free. I want to be free. And it's so crazy now because, wherever I go in the world, people come to me and they say, we want to be just like you. We want to be so free like you are, because like I really am in so many ways living my childhood dream. I'm right now traveling the world. I'm right now
Mm.
living in a 5-star hotel. I haven't worked for a year and a half. I am not worried about money for the first time in my life. I grew up
Mhm.
poor, not poor, but like my parents were immigrants. So we were
Mm.
a family working very hard to overcome circumstances. And
Mm.
for the first time in my life, my faith in God is so strong. And I feel like my mind is so clear of energetic blocks, false beliefs, encumbrances, that I know my path to success is assured. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I've never had that level of clarity and confidence in my entire life. And I really I have had a lot of trauma in my life, and I'm so grateful for all those experiences because they fundamentally changed me so dramatically to be able to live a life that's so exceptional like I'm living now.
So those experiences made you who you are today. The same like my experiences made me who I am today. And I don't know about you, Monica, but I look back on the experiences that were really challenged, the ones that I don't even know how I stayed safe in some situations. So they're all different kinds of experiences that you wouldn't naturally say, yes, I want that experience. But those experiences created the person that I am today. And I love who I am today. So I can't, I don't have any feeling about or negative feeling about the things that, or regret, I think it's regret about the things that have happened in my journey because they triggered, or trigger's probably not the right word, they shaped how I respond to the world. And I love how I respond to the world. Mostly, I still have my moments like every human on the planet, but mostly I love how I respond. And I get the feeling that that's the space that you're in as well.
Yeah, I'm sitting here like shaking my head up and down. Yes, yes, yes. And I think, one of the big, one of the energy healers I met on my journey, I've had a very long journey and
Yeah.
I've met just such compelling, amazing people on this road, and one of the energy healers I met, had taught me about soul contracts, that before we enter this life, we choose our family, we choose these people that are going to teach us certain lessons. And I remember, this was years and years and years ago when she taught me this conceptually. I remember saying to her, "You're crazy. I didn't choose any of these people." you know, I was just like, no. And, over time in my own healing journey, just last night I got in bed and I was thinking about two romantic relationships that I had that really devastated me, like
Yeah.
really to the core, broke a big part of my psyche. And
Yeah.
I got in bed last night and I thought, God, I'm so thankful to both of those people. Like, I'm so
Wow.
grateful because if it hadn't been for them, they wouldn't have taught me about all these. I wouldn't have gone on a certain journey to learn certain things that would have unlocked certain doors. And now
Mm-hmm.
I really get to be a force for change in the world, in
Yeah.
a really positive direction at a level that very few people can get to. And what a blessing that's been, not only for my life, but what a blessing I can be in other people's lives.
Yeah.
And there is literally no anger. There's no anger in me at all. Like, there's just so much gratitude for me making the choice to have this experience in this lifetime at this
Yeah.
moment in time and to be in this vessel doing this work. I'm sure,
Yeah.
I think that's why you and I connected so strongly, because I think that you and I operate on a plane that is exactly what the world needs at this moment in time.
That's so interesting you say that, Monica, because I started my journey 40 years ago in 1984. And it was, I'd been married, I don't know how long, 18 months, just had a new baby, and I had no plans for my life. I didn't know what I wanted for my life. I was 24, and a friend came to visit and she said, this is in the October, so it'll be 40 years in October. And she said to me, "You're going to see this psychic." And I said, "No, I'm not." She said, "Yes, you are." And she drove me there. She paid for it. She looked after my baby. She said, "This is part of your destiny, is to see this person," basically. And that moment changed my life forever, because I was thinking about leaving my husband and taking my baby with me, and that would not have been a pretty journey. And the clairvoyant knew that. And he said, "If you keep going that way, you will have a terrible life and you'll die at 53. Now, whether the die at 53 is true, I don't know. But he said, "You'll have many health challenges. You'll be very ill in your 30s and 40s. And I was. And he said, "But you have another destiny. And if you choose that destiny, your marriage will survive. You will overcome the illnesses in your 30s and 40s. You will have many happy moments in your life and live into your 90s and be of great benefit to the world." I knew the truth of this. I really knew the truth. And then I had this, and I thought, I can change my destiny. And I made a decision. I went home from there and I lay in bed and I said, "God, what is it that you want me to do?" And I had an experience of translocation where I was in my future walking down a corridor, and I went out onto a stage, like an enormous stage, and there were thousands of people in that room, and it had tiers, as in like level 1, level 2. There was just people everywhere, a bit like Britain's Got Talent, that space where they do the Britain's Got Talent. I could smell the musty air. I could hear the echo of my footprints on the hallway as I went onto stage. And then the vision stopped and I was back in my body. But that vision is what's kept me going for the last 40 years. That I had to do something for the world. And then I would go, "Okay, God, I'm ready now." And then I'd start getting nightmares, 8, 9 nights in a row. And then I'd say, "Okay, I'm not ready." And then the nightmares would stop. So I'd keep learning for another couple of years, experimenting. And then I'd go, "Okay, I'm ready now." I did that for maybe 20 years. In the end, I went, "You know what? I'm not going to tell you when I'm ready. You tell me when I'm ready, and you make the path easeful." And then last year, we were heading in a corporate direction with stress management and taking my work corporate so that we could make an impact in the world through that door. And you know how there's sliding door moments? Like, I love that movie, Sliding Doors, because it was literally like that. I was going in that direction with that mentoring, but that person got the flu and they couldn't talk to me for a couple of weeks. In that 2 weeks, I got pivoted 180 degrees to go in another direction with another mentor. And we started the Arakira Institute with 5 students. And so I just went, "Okay, God, you're telling me that now's the time." And by working with these students who are highly qualified therapists, counselors, and they're saying, "Julie, we're here, but your work is up here." I was gobsmacked because I was intimidated by these highly qualified people. What did they want from me? Like, what did I have to teach? And with the working with them and seeing what they're doing with my body of work and how their clients are responding, I am in awe. And I just go, you know, now is the time. Now is the time for 40 years of work that I've done. It's now ready to bring to the world, because the world wasn't ready for it pre-COVID. The world is ready for it post-COVID.
Do you see my face over here, Julie? I'm like looking, I'm like, shaking my head up and down and going, yeah, 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 because what you just said, and I'm a little bit younger than you, but what you just said has exactly been my experience. Like
Wow.
I remember, I'm from New York City, so my prior business was teaching about love and psychology and higher
Yeah.
consciousness, and my business name was School of Love NYC.
Mm.
But I had clients all over the globe. And when I first got the download from God that I was supposed to teach about love and psychology, I was so resistant. I was like, please don't make me. I don't want to. Not me. Go to somebody else. This is weird.
Yep.
Everybody's going to laugh, especially because I was a lawyer, and you know, even when I would tell my friends, yeah, you guys, we should really teach about love and psychology because there's a very particular way psychologically that a healthy relationship is formed. And the
Yep.
thing is, right now, all the forces of the world are actually coming against that, and people are unconscious. So they are basically falling into a trap of lovelessness. We're seeing a worldwide
Mm.
epidemic of loneliness, but we're seeing also a worldwide epidemic of marital
Yeah.
dysfunction, divorce, people who are very unhappy in their dating life. So at the time when I started with my ideas, to say that people thought I was crazy would be an understatement. And even my own family was like, you should not be talking about this stuff out loud.
Same. Same.
Because I was talking about my divorce, I was talking about my psyche, I was talking about generational trauma, I was
Yeah.
talking about lack of boundaries, I was talking about codependency, I was talking about
Mm.
these things, and everyone was like, and
Yeah.
I thought, probably similar to you, I thought, look, God asked me to do something, and who am I going to say no to God? And
Mm-hmm.
I thought my success was going to happen like a decade ago. I was like, I'm ready for it to drop anytime now. Like anytime
Yeah.
it can drop down. And I didn't realize for me that journey was only beginning because God needed
Yeah.
to work and change me to
Yeah.
be a greater force of healing in the world.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that there was still so much dysfunction left in me that needed to be cleared before I could teach at the level that I want to teach at now. When my father was dying, my father died on my birthday, and my
Oh,
father and I had a very complexly beautiful relationship because my father was such a deep feminist.
mm.
He really believed in the power of women. And
Yeah.
my father, as he was dying, I said to him, my father was Indian and my mother's European, my mother's Spanish. So obviously, Mahatma
Mm.
Gandhi was a very big force in my father's psyche. And as my
Yeah.
father was dying, I said to my dad, my wish is to be the greatest teacher of consciousness that the world has ever had. And will you bless
Wow.
that before you go?
Yeah.
And he blessed it. And, I
Yeah.
feel my father's spirit in me because I feel right now the collective psyche is so filled with fear. And there's so
Mm.
much, for lack of a better word, babble. Like there's so many people
Mm.
talking. And if I sat those people down in a chair and said, would you go undergo psychoanalysis, including world leaders, they would run for the hills. And it's
Yeah.
hard to have a level of discernment, right, about who's telling the truth.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
feel like no greater opportunity has been given than this moment in time for someone to say, listen, this is not God's path for the world. And I feel like it's women who are going to be those voices, because the level of compassion and empathy, and for, you know, someone like you and someone like me who have been on this road, the spiritual road is I don't know what your experience has been, Julie, but it's a brutal road. And you have to
I was going to
be
say,
exceptionally courageous.
yeah, and you know what, Monica, if you knew what the road would bring, you would step off before you took your first step. And I think that
That's
that
probably
is
why most people
why,
don't even get on it.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
no
like,
greater teacher there was than Christ. They crucified him. You know, I mean, like, just look at the life of Christ. He was lauded by a small number of people, but he was openly mocked and crucified. So people don't go
yeah,
on a spiritual path who are choosing the easy world of the easy mortal material world.
yeah. And you know, there's two ways to go on your path, right? There's the way of the renunciate, which is where you renounce the world and you don't participate in all the worldly requirements of, you know, earning your money, making your food. It's the monk, really, sitting in the cave. And then there's the householder, where you are in the world, you are navigating finances, you are navigating relationships, you are navigating um, the energy of the world because you're in it, but still at the same time maintaining that connection to God, source, whatever word you want to use, in the midst of all the chaos and all of the impact of the world. And so I think the householder journey is much more fraught with challenges, with what other words am I getting? I can't even think of the word, but to be taken off course, opportunities to actually leave your path than if you're a renunciate. When you're a renunciate, like you can, and I'm talking about like nuns and more nuns probably than priests, and monks and nuns probably I'm talking about, who can just pray and focus and be one pointed without having to deal too much with the world. And I think that the journey makes us stronger because we know that we've made this vow of doing the work, making the commitment to do the work, live our best life despite the challenges and the it's not opportunities, it's, I can't think of the word, I'm losing my words. When, what's that word, Monica, when we I can't think. I literally cannot think of the word that I want to say, so obviously I can't say it. But
Well, you know,
it's
the
such a,
part that's resonating with me about what you're saying. I hope I didn't interrupt you. Did I just interrupt you?
no,
I didn't
I
mean to.
didn't have no
Okay.
more words.
The part that's resonating with me is like, you know, at some point for me, the journey was so tough. You know, like
Mm,
it was definitely a dark night of the soul. And it
mm,
took me so long to come out of. You know, I mean, you know, I think that steel is forged in fire for a reason, right? Like you change
exactly.
through the process of going through this journey, but there's nobody who can teach you, like nobody's going to coddle you or hold you through that journey except for your relationship with God. That's a very
Correct.
solitary journey. And
It is.
during that time in my soul, I wanted to be a renunciate. Now, I didn't want to be a
Yes,
monk or a nun. I grew up Catholic. You know, I grew up Catholic, and that was not any desire I had to join a convent, but I
no,
wanted to get out of the world because the
yes,
energy of the world was killing me. I felt it was killing
Yeah.
me. And I felt that the
Mm.
collective unconscious was killing me, you know? And the
Yeah.
start of the pandemic was for me like a very heightened moment of that, because I saw the pandemic differently than like 99% of the population. And when I was choosing to speak about it, because I wanted to protect people, I loved them so deeply. I wanted to protect them. And I felt like I was getting punched in the face for
Mm.
being that person. I began to say, forget it. Like, I just want to go
Yeah.
live in the woods in peace. I've got enough for
Mm.
myself. I don't care anymore. Leave me alone. And
Mm.
and I sat in that place for a long time, you know, and then coming out of it now in the world and of the world. I'm in the world, but I'm not of the world anymore. You know, I'm of course I'm of the
Mm.
world. Like, you know, I bought a sweater yesterday and I'm gonna go, you know, take a walk today. But what I started to realize was that for me to function inside of this mortal plane as a spiritual person, I need to have very good boundaries for myself
Mm.
in terms of what my capacity is. And I have to not be apologetic for that. You know, that I'm not
Yeah.
going to be able to function like 99% of the population, because energy depletion can wipe me out for days. You know, the
Mm.
wrong interaction can take me out. And I'm not willing
Yeah.
to be a martyr. I'm willing to work and be of service in terms of what I believe God has asked me to do, but not at the expense of my own health or safety anymore. And, you
Yeah.
know, I feel like what you're saying is correct. And but it's like, you know, like it's hard to talk this language because you're talking in a, you know, I'll give you a funny story. Yesterday I was talking to an old client of mine who's a good friend of mine now, and I was
Yeah.
telling her, so right now I'm in Corsica, which is a small island, a French island, in the Mediterranean. And I was telling her that like a gentleman here has invited me to go boating with him around Corsica to look at the coves and the ocean. And I was saying, like, you know, an old me would have just hopped on that boat and like been like, let's speed off. And me now is like, who is this person? How much time is it? How much is it going to require of me? Am I going to step
Mm.
off that boat and be completely depleted? You know, and every moment of my life has to be now this calculation, and it's
Mm.
challenging to live like this. Like, you know, I mean, like, and it's not just
Yeah.
that, it's all the time. You know, it's like every
Mm.
experience is like that. And that's challenging. And, you know, I mean, of course it's a much simpler challenge than challenges I've had in the past, but it's it's something I couldn't imagine, and nobody kind of writes a book and teaches you about, you know?
No, and they can't teach you. Like, there's certain things that you actually have to experience and make decisions about yourself. And the teacher won't tell you of what those experiences are going to be. But when you share the experiences, the teacher can then validate them for you. But they're not going to tell you what that journey will look like, because it will look like a unique journey for each individual. But the experiences have a pattern that the teacher will recognize. Have you found that?
What I've found, I think, maybe as a slight iteration of what you're saying, I believe that certain of us women are ascending to a place that we've never held before. And we're the vanguard. We're going ahead of
Mm.
the others to basically lead the others. And
Yeah.
what I feel is that because my psychology has changed dramatically in the last 4 years, it's a
Mm.
result of traveling solo around the world during a pandemic without a vaccine and moving across borders with no fear. And then
Yeah.
dealing with the challenges of being that nomadic and that alone on that journey. So my psyche has
Mm.
changed. It's like, I haven't had anybody to call up on the phone and say like, hey, I'm staying at this ashram in Mexico and I've encountered this challenge. What do you think? Like I haven't had anybody to talk with about the hero's journey I've decided to put myself on. So the the
Yeah.
thing that I think is like, wow, I'm here at this moment in time to solve a problem. And in my solving of my problem, I will lead the others to freedom. Almost like, like my journey will open the doors for other people to take their journeys or will give them
Because
some
it puts
insight into their journeys.
it'll put the frequency in the matrix for people to follow. And I've often like, I don't talk very often about the journey that I've been on in the last 40 years. And probably because I don't remember a lot of it, I'm more in the present and the future than in the past. But the thing that I am aware of is that I haven't had anyone that I could talk to, really, the the odd person about some of the experiences that I've had, because what I found was people didn't want to hear about my experiences. Yeah, because they were extraordinary and they didn't want to hear. And so I learned to be very discerning about who I shared what with. But I've always felt like I've been a machete cutter in the jungle, creating the path that hasn't been trod before. That's how I've described myself to myself.
Well, one of the things I kept thinking about in my own life, during my dark night of the soul, I was like, to say alone, I mean alone. Like not a friend
Mm.
in the world, not a family member to support me, like no financial support from anybody, alone. And it was such a
Yeah,
contrast because my whole life I had been so popular. Like, I was like on student government as a kid. I always had people following me everywhere. And it was like I was seeing the other side. And
mm.
in the beginning of that level of aloneness, like where it's like an echo chamber, the phone doesn't ring. There's no emails in your box. Like nobody cares whether you're
Mm.
alive or dead. And not for a
Yeah,
small amount of time, but for like a large amount of time. In the beginning of that echo chamber, you go a little crazy. You're like, and then towards the end of it, you're like, it's so peaceful here. Oh God,
yeah,
this
yeah,
silence is amazingly beautiful. Wow.
yeah,
And like my connection with God is so tight because I'm
yeah,
watching God protect me over and over and over again to the point of there's no worry in my system anymore. I know God has
yeah,
me. And
yeah,
during that journey, I kept thinking about the chosen ones. The chosen ones are biblically the 144,000 that God has chosen. And I started like doing mathematical calculations as I was like, what percentage of the world would really be chosen if the world has 8.5 billion people? And, it's like 0.00016 or something like this, right? And then I
wow,
realized like, wow, that thing that you're talking about, which is like a connection to another soul that is like, I can finally talk about what this has been for me without fear, without shame, and tell you how
yeah,
much it has been more than I could bear at times. had not I
Yeah.
had God protecting me. And I
Yeah.
think that was the thing I started, thinking about. So when you and I connected, I was telling you this before we started recording. It was like my heart was like, there's one, and you lose your breath
Yeah.
because you're like, thank God I didn't think I'd ever find another. And, in my own
Yeah.
work, I have kept thinking that what the world really needs is these people to meet and fall in love and form a new community that raises the frequency of the planet. And the part that has been the most challenging for me, Julie, since I travel the world and I meet people, and everybody wants to tell me they're chosen to. Everybody.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
as because of what I do for a living, I usually just let them talk and I listen. And then I'm like, no, you're not. And let me tell you exactly why you're not. Not as a denigration, but as a like, listen, this is a time of discernment. And when
Yeah.
everybody's an influencer, nobody's an influencer. And who are you going to listen to if the storm is coming, which it is, and the water's rising? And who is
Mm.
going to lead you out of this? Because now is not a time to make a false step. It's a time to
Mm.
really begin to get quiet and internal and listen to the answers within yourself, but also to figure out like who's telling you the truth, who's been through it, and how
Yeah.
can they coach you through this? And can you listen? And maybe you can't, and that's part of it too. But I don't know. You know what I mean, Julie? Does that make sense what I'm saying to you? Does that resonate with you?
Yeah. Like the biggest thing is that discernment about who you talk to. I had this vision. I'm going to share this story. And I can't remember when this experience happened, but it was maybe 20 years ago, maybe longer. And I had this meditation where I was walking down a dirt track that had the grass it was another one of those translocation type experiences that I said at the beginning, where I was walking onto the stage. And I was walking with a brown man with no shoes on. He had white hair and a white beard. And because I was studying the great traditions of, Asia at the time, thought I was in India. I thought I was walking a guru from India or a teacher from India. And what happened was he stopped and he gathered all of these rocks and he put them in the spiral, Fibonacci spiral shape in the dirt. And then he said to me, "What do you see?" And I wanted to be the good girl, the good student, and I wanted to give the perfect answer. And so I was taking my time. And when he heard me take my breath to actually speak, his foot came and he went like that, and all those rocks scattered everywhere. I was devastated. I cannot describe the devastation. And I wanted to defend myself. And he goes like this. And then I went to speak again and he went like this. And then I went to speak again and he went, "Wait." And I like shook back. And so I waited. All of those stones came back from wherever they scattered to, back in the form of the
Oh,
Fibonacci
wow.
spiral in the dirt. He said, "Now speak." And I knew that I could take my time. I said, "It doesn't matter how far off track I go, I will always come back on path." And he just went, and we kept walking. Now, that was the experience of the vision or the dream or the meditation. I don't know what it was. But then in 2015, a, a woman that I was in a mastermind with said, "I'm taking a group of people to Uluru in Central Australia on retreat." And it was called the Fridge of Rainbow Light retreat. And I just knew, I had to go. I didn't have the money, but I just knew I had to go. And so I shared it with my friend and I said, do you want to go with me? And she said, yeah. So we shared a room and that brought our costs down a little bit. And we went on this retreat. And on the first day, we drove to, there's a fence around Uluru, and the Ananu people actually are the custodians of the land inside the fence and the Uluru. And when we got to it was like a security thing. We had to have a pass to get through. The retreat leader said, right, once we go through over the grid, we are maintaining silence. We aren't speaking. And I thought, okay. As soon as we went across, this voice said, in my ear, welcome home, sister. We've been waiting for you. And I'm looking around. Is anyone else? And then they said that you were one of us. And you were the elder in charge of the water hole where the women came to wash their babies. And I thought, okay. So then I said to the retreat leader, we stopped at a spot and we could speak. And I said, is there a water hole here? And I told her what had happened. She just gave me this very interesting look and didn't answer me. And I thought, okay, I won't speak about it then. And then the next morning we had to get up at like 3:30 a.m. to watch the sunrise. And we got on this bus with tires. There was the guide, 10 people. And so we went and watched the sunrise. It was all great. And I like to sit at the front of the bus, so I was sitting next to the female guide. And we got out at one point and he built a little he showed us how Uluru came up from under the ground and formed itself. And after he said that, I said to this woman, is there a water hole at Uluru? And she looked at me and she said, why? And I said, and I told her about the experience. She said, oh, now I know why I'm on this tour, because normally it's just the driver, but they told me I had to come as well. And I said, okay. And she said, just wait. And I went, okay. So then we parked at another spot and we walked down this dirt track, and then we veered to the left, but the one that veered to the right was identical to my experience 20 odd years ago, where I was walking with this elder who kicked the rocks. And I'm wanting to go that way. And I thought, no, I know that way. And so we had to go to the left and we went into this cave. It was like a rock overhang, and there was all this rock art from the Aboriginals there. And I'm just standing there looking, because I've got this voice in my head saying, ask about the key. And I'm looking around. No one else is like they can hear it. And then he goes, ask about the key 5 times. And I thought, okay. And then the woman that was like the extra, she said, we don't normally tell this story, but I'm going to share it because I can see some of you have found the key. And I just went like this and I went like that and she went like that. And she told this story and she drew this drawing, and if I can draw it and you can see it. And basically she drew, I think it was like that. 3 circles, 3 lines like that. So that is the key, like a legend. So that means something. And she said, so this here, the tour guides can tell Aboriginal stories and they don't have to be Aboriginal. these stories here can only be told by the rangers, and they have to be Aboriginal. And these stories here, they're told by the elders. And if you are privileged enough to sit with an elder, you do not share those stories with anyone, because that's between
Oh,
you.
wow.
Basically, that's between you and God, that experience. And if you
Oh,
share that,
wow. Wow.
dissipate the energy. So the funny thing was that
Oh,
I had
wow.
written the script of my book, but I had stories in my book that were elder stories. So I had to go home and take those stories out. But I had left out some
Oh,
stories that were
wow.
ranger stories, so I put them in. So I had to rework my book, and I did it in 2 weeks. And then when we left there, we had to walk down another path closer to the rock. And when we got there, there was this waterhole. And the tour guide was saying, and this is where the women came to wash their babies. And I just looked at her. I was not crying. I was sobbing. And she just put her arm around me and she led me away. And I said, "Do you have any idea of the gift you have given me today?" She said, "Yes, I do." And she just took me
Oh,
away from
wow.
everyone else. It was a life-changing moment for me. And that was on like day 2 of the retreat. I said to my friend, "I can go home now. I've experienced what I needed to experience." And so that was a life-changing experience for me, in that I'd had that translocation experience, thinking I was in India, but thinking that those tufts of grass look like in Australia. And I could never like correlate it. But I was with an Aboriginal elder
Well, you know,
all
the whole
those years
time
ago.
what I was thinking when you were telling this story is what an open channel you are. Like, as you were telling the story,
Oh,
I was like, you're such a remarkable, you're just, let's just say it from the outset, you're just a remarkable person, Julie. But part of what makes you such a remarkable soul is, and this is from before when we've had conversations before,
yeah.
you're so open to divinity. Like, you're such an open channel that even when something doesn't make sense to you, you're open to it. You're just like, oh, I'm
Yeah.
okay. I'm having this vision, or this person says go this way and I should go this way. Like, and I think you're such a good example of what the spiritual journey is, because a lot of it really doesn't make sense. And also, it isn't what you really understand or even want sometimes, but it's
Exactly.
your belief and faith in being that channel and following those steps that
Yeah.
don't make sense,
Yeah.
and like, it's funny because several years ago, I meditate every morning, and I usually meditate between like 30 minutes to like an hour. And during the pandemic, because I was so alone, I was meditating for really long periods of time. And that was really produced so much change in me, because I was getting so many downloads dropping from the etheric plane into my mind and my system. And I got a download of where I'm supposed to be, like where I'm going. And
Mm.
to be honest with you, I didn't believe it. Like, I was like, that's not possible. Like, and I kept getting the feed, and I was like, that's not that's not even remotely possible. And then I realized that the journey I had been on was to prepare me for that divine appointment.
Yeah.
And that, like, I don't know, like exactly what you're saying, and I think about my own life, the paths I've taken. like, not because I've wanted to take them necessarily, but because my soul always felt this is the right step. And if I don't take it, I'm going to get sick or die. So for the
Yeah.
integrity and the health of my soul, this is the next step for me. And
Yeah. Yeah.
it's not,
Yeah.
like,
I
but
get
when you were talking, I just said to myself, my God, this woman is open. And thank God, thank God that you're so open. Just thank God that you're plugged into the matrix at this level, because my guess is there's very, very few people who are your age that are vibrating at your frequency, and you serve as a role model and an inspiration for them to see,
Oh,
and
thank
thank
you.
God.
Oh,
Julie, I think that was the perfect ending for our episode.
yeah. I think we fried the network.
No, I said, I think that was the perfect ending for this episode. I have no more to say. Thank God for Julie Lewin.
Oh my goodness, like it just went bang.
The spiritual gifts. And one of the things that you and I talked about in the past, which is like, it's such a good moment to talk about this, is like just how much the energy can influence the external environments. Like I went to a Reiki practitioner a few weeks ago, and her and I were talking about, I said to her, well, right now we're in a spiritual war between dark and light, and all the lights in the room turned on, like out of the blue. She and I looked at each other, and we just started laughing and laughing and laughing, because we were just like, that's frequency work. That's
Do you know
frequency
what?
work. So when you're
That's
saying that we fried the system, I'm like, we probably did fry the system. Imagine if we found 144,000 of us. Huh?
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. So we probably should wrap up. We'll wrap up the episode, and I'll get Tash to do her magic. But Monica, thank you so much for joining me on this podcast. And we have talked about some really cool things, and I know that we're going to have lots more chats and lots more to talk about. But I hope all of our listeners have enjoyed this chat. Is there anything that you want to share with our listeners that is your last like message, or is there somewhere they can contact you? What would you like to say?
Well, I think I said this to you, Julie. Right now, I'm on sabbatical. I'm just working on I've been testing some personal theories about finance. There's some certain journeys I'd like to take that no woman has taken before. And I've just been really spending time doing that level of frequency work on some new program shifts. And so I'm not really, right now, I'm not selling anything. I don't want anything. I just want to be. And if people listen to our interview and they feel like they're interested in my message, and they think maybe there'd be a divine partnership or aligned forces, they're free to contact me at my email. And my email, I think you're going to probably list on the episode somewhere.
We will.
And that's my private account. And, let's just see what happens.